Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for September 20th, 2021, around 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot to talk about today, including the potential for two additional storms to be forming across the tropical Atlantic during the next several days, and a look at the very complex forecast ahead, including a storm that may threaten the Lesser Antilles down the road. So let's go and jump straight into everything. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this afternoon, we continue to monitor progress of three different systems out there across the tropical Atlantic. We have Tropical Storm Peter, Tropical Storm Rose, and what will likely become Tropical Storm Sam over the next several days. And these two systems, Rose and Peter, pose no concern right now to land. But interestingly, Sam back here, or future Sam, could become a possible threat for the Greater Antilles over the next several days and into the next week or so. And we'll talk about why that is here in a moment. So looking as of right now, this is the Tropical Storm Peter forecast. And again, right now, the cone of uncertainty stops right before Bermuda. So Bermuda is not officially in the cone, but probably will be during the next several days. This is expected to remain a relatively weak system during the duration, really, of its entire life cycle through the next 5 days. And a large part of that is we can tell that right now, Peter is very disorganized and dealing with a fair amount of wind shear across the region. We notice that there is, again, just the changing wind flows throughout the entire atmosphere. And if we look here at the water vapor satellite, we'll actually notice what's going on here. We have an upper level low sitting out here, which has been the predominant forecast during the last several days. And this upper level low is going to be backing towards the south and west during the next several days, but it is still pumping in a lot of southwesterly vertical wind shear over top of Peter right now. And this is the one thing that is preventing this from really becoming strong. And if we actually look here at the zoomed in visible satellite imagery, we noticed that we had an earlier eruption of convection, but that earlier eruption seems to have pushed an outflow boundary, which may have actually really destroyed this low-level vortex, as it's not very strong. We can take a look here at the recon plane that was in there from earlier. We noticed that pressures are remaining roughly at about 1,008 to 1,007 millibars. And this indicates that, again, the vortex is not very strong. So it would not really take much at this point for anything to completely disrupt the circulation, as it's very weak. And it's possible that that is beginning to occur today. Again, we can kind of see that we don't really have convection that is trying to fire on all sides. There's some pretty dry air over here as well. But there is indications, again, we can kind of tell the low-level cloud field is still swirling in, but is becoming a little bit disrupted because of that outflow boundary that pushed out. So we may, in fact, see this open up into a tropical wave as this continues to head off towards the north and west here. Now, one of the primary steering influences for Peter is going to be this weakness in the ridge right now. Again, our storm is sitting roughly at about in here, and it's just really going to follow the weakness in the ridge and begin to kind of curl up something like this later in the week. And we can kind of see, again, as this ridge expands towards the north here, again, here's this big Bermuda Azores, or really not Bermuda Azores high, but the big North Atlantic ridge, rather. And this is just going to generally steer the storm northward and not really allow for a storm to get much closer to the United States here. So again, I don't really see the potential for any significant impacts to the United States. I think from Peter, we are probably safe, at least for the time being. Now, again, here's our storm approaching Bermuda by Thursday, Wednesday night into Thursday. So this could be a threat to Bermuda down the road. But again, this is the remnants here of Odette, which may try to come back into a tropical cyclone later in the week. We got this big blocking high here, basically undercutting Odette, basically now forcing Peter off towards the north and east as it starts to get entangled here with the remnants of Odette. And then eventually we can see this big upper level low, one of these upper level lows in a series of upper level lows that kind of cut off here and move generally eastward into this big ridge and kind of get absorbed. But these upper level lows will generally carry a storm towards the north here. So again, Not really watching for significant impacts to the United States at this time from that. We're also watching a new tropical storm. This is Tropical Storm Rose out here in the eastern Atlantic. We can see that, again, the forecast for Rose is pretty straightforward. This is expected to remain a tropical cyclone during the next several days, but is expected to be gradually weakening and will probably struggle to intensify even further as this heads off towards the north and east. Not really concerned about this. We do notice that, again, there is some pretty strong upper level winds that are cutting across the storm right now. We can kind of see some of the convection over here getting blown very rapidly off towards the north and east. But again, there is a fair amount of central convection here, but again, most of it is kind of getting pushed off towards the north and east, indicating that we still have some upper level winds over top here. And this is going to be the main story during the next several days as this begins to head off towards the north and east. And again, it's traveling in the opposite direction of the shear vector, which means this will likely begin to weaken. In fact, it will weaken as this moves northward into the cooler sea surface temperatures as well. Now, we're also watching an additional wave out here, and this is the one of main focus during the next several days. This is Invest Area 98L, and this is becoming rapidly a developing situation. This is actually here we can see where Rose is off towards the top left of, or top left of the screen here. And here's Invest Area 98L. Now, if we look down here at the surface, what we can tell is that we do have these low-level cloud features that are beginning to change direction here. Now, this is still part of the monsoon trough, but there is some indication that this is likely becoming a tropical cyclone, and this is where the presumable center of circulation would be. And if we actually switch this to the infrared satellite loop here, we can tell that, again, we have definitely rotation in the mid-levels. And this is probably becoming a low-level circulation at this point. And we can kind of tell, again, those cloud features are beginning to be pulled in and wrapped around. And we can kind of see some of these upper-level features even wrapping around. So this is likely now becoming a tropical cyclone and will likely continue to intensify during the next several days as this generally heads off towards the northwest here. Now, generally, we talked about the steering flow with regards to the previous two systems. So how's this going to fare for 98L? Well, first of all, 98L, this is actually Rose right here, but 98L is actually far enough to the south where its primary influence isn't really going to be controlled by this weakness in the ridge just yet. Now, it is still moving off towards the north and west, and again, will continue to do so during the next several days. And in fact, here is the 500 millibar heights here now beginning to kind of promptly show up with a strengthening 98L. Now, over the next several days, this is already out to hour 102, but over the next several days, we're going to have a pair of upper level lows here, which is mainly creating a weakness in this ridge. But the storm is pretty far south. It's sitting at about 12 degrees, almost 12.5 degrees north, which means it is pretty far to the south and removed from the larger steering flow towards the north, which is trying to generally create a turn towards the north and west. And in fact, again, we do get a storm that moves in that direction as the trough begins to significantly dig in down here, but we get a ridge that sets up again just upstream of that, which will begin to move towards the north or move kind of south and east. And we can see this ridge begins to dig in here pretty substantially by Wednesday. This is out towards about Tuesday night going into Wednesday on this particular forecast. And again, we're going to have a storm that begins to kind of turn back towards the south and west, similar towards the evolution there of Irma, just not necessarily in terms of the intensity, obviously, in an eventual track. But we can see that this is really far out in time. This is October 1st. But again, we get this strengthening ridge up here and a storm generally on a westward track. But a cutoff low here, this upper level low here, might be able to kind of be the one thing to turn it towards the north and west. So we'll be watching how this evolves with time. And in fact, even on the European forecast here, the European is pretty similar, but it is a lot further south than the GFS forecast. In fact, again, the GFS forecast here, just for time's sake, This is just about at the same time. We'll go out to about hour 240, and it is vastly different on the GFS in the euro out in this time range. Now, why am I showing this is because this overall pattern is very unpredictable, and there's a lot of variables from this thing going into the Lesser Antilles to this thing becoming just a complete fish storm and nothing to worry about. The bottom line is that there is going to be something to talk about over the next several days. And in fact, I believe even a lot of the models aren't necessarily capturing this evolution very quickly here. Again, this is by tomorrow morning, early tomorrow morning, about 2 a.m., and the H-Wharf only goes with about 1,008 millibars and continuously kind of weakens it, becoming a brief tropical cyclone. It doesn't become a full tropical cyclone really until Thursday. And this is going to matter as well in terms of the initial track and intensity. And you can see here by the end of the forecast period, this is sitting about 45 west and 15 north. And this is again on day 5. And we can kind of see that again, the Euro and the H-Wharf are in decent agreement in terms of the track for the next couple of days. So this is going to be something to monitor. I'm not entirely concerned about it. Certainly nothing to get riled up over just yet, but it is something to monitor as we progress through the next several days. And in fact, I do believe that this will be something that we will have to closely monitor. And of course, our friends in Bermuda will have to continue to monitor the progress of Peter. All right. So that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow.